Hoxne Heritage Group. We're delighted to welcome Mr. Roger Bland from the British Museum. Roger was formerly a curator in the Department of Coins and Medals and was seconded to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport from 1994 to 2003. Roger is responsible for the Portable Antiquities Scheme, a project to record all archaeological objects found by the public in England and Wales, and for the museum's operation of the Treasure Act. And in 2012, he was appointed Keeper of the Department of Prehistory and Europe. Roger is the fellow of the MacDonald Institute for Archaeological Research at the University of Cambridge, as well as an honorary lecturer at the Institute of Archaeology at the University College London, and a fellow and member of the Council of the Society of Antiquaries, and the president of the British Numismatic Society, I hope I said that right, and the vice president of the Royal Numismatic Society, along with many other professional organisations. I've got a list of publications which he's contributed or written, which I leave on the side if people would be interested in looking at them afterwards. He's very kindly agreed to come and talk about the Hoxne Hoard, and return 21 years, almost to the month, later for our benefit. Please read and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Sue. Can I just test the level of this? Is this audible at the back?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay, is that better? Right. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much. It was a bit like This Is Your Life, having your past flashing in front of your eyes. But the piece of the past I remember best coming back here, actually, was, as Sue said, it was just 7 weeks under 21 years ago, November 1992, when this hit the front page of the Sun newspaper, and I don't suppose Hoxne's been on the front page of the Sun newspaper too many times since. And Sue was telling me that she was hoping that Eric Laws, who you see in the front, seen on that picture, was going to be here, but sadly he's not well enough to be with us. But I gather he came and sorted out your test fitting in the summer. So I'm very glad to know that he's still with us. And this was really the most sensational find of its generation. We've had a few more since. Some people might have heard of the enormous hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold, the Staffordshire hoard from 4 years ago. But I'm a specialist in the Roman period, and I still think this was the best treasure that's come up. And it even inspired this cartoon. There we are. It's very topical, isn't it? I expect they're still thinking of trying this today, but George Osborne and David Cameron instead of John Major and Norman Lamont. And there was pages about it inside the newspaper. This is my colleague Catherine Johns, who's the great expert on Romano British jewellery, who studied and catalogued all the finds at the British Museum. It was brought up, I think, the day after it was excavated, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And there was a very hastily staged press conference for it at the British Museum. Here's the Sun's own reporter trying a bit of metal detecting on the banks of the River Thames. And this story on the next page is the sort of story that makes archaeologists' teeth really grind, telling you where to go to find treasure, which and I think that when newspapers like The Sun report this sort of story, it's not going to give the messages that archaeologists probably would like to convey. But so what exactly was there in the hoard? And what was it that caused all the excitement about it? Well, I hope you'll forgive me for highlighting these at the beginning. My background is as a specialist in coins, and this is still the biggest hoard of gold and silver coins ever found in this country by a very long way. 580 gold coins, just under 15,000 silver coins. It really was a massive store of wealth. And it was all found by Eric Laws, who we saw on the front cover while looking for this, which was Mr. Watling, the tenant farmer's hammer, which he did also find, and we also have that in the British Museum as well. But there was absolutely no hint that that's the field where he made the find, and as I know you're interested in the heritage of Hoxne, I'm sure you know this, there was no real hint that it was going to contain any traces of Roman occupation. Eric told us how he started detecting along a wheel track in the field, and he first found one of those small silver coins, and then a second one a foot further on. And then a foot further still, his detector gave a strong signal, and he dug down about 18 inches to reveal the main body of the hoard. And Mr. Watling, the farmer, described how he'd set his plough a few inches deeper that year, thus disturbing the coins from the top of the container. And Eric dug down, and I think he filled, he filled 2 plastic carrier bags full of Roman treasure. And then he took a break for lunch. Why not? Very sensible too. And this is, I think he took this picture of some of the finds in the boot of his car. After lunch, he showed his finds to Pete Watling, the farmer, and they agreed that this was really something quite special, and they reported it to the authorities, and it was the land agent of Suffolk County Council, as I understand it, who was able, because Suffolk County Council operated a model County Council archaeological service, and I'm glad to say they still do, they were able to call out the archaeologists from the Suffolk Archaeological Unit, who came out the next day to excavate what was left in the ground. As I say, Eric had filled 2 carrier bags full of finds, but the bulk of the discovery was still left in the ground. And the excavation, it was done, obviously you can imagine, you wouldn't really want to leave a hole with several thousand gold and silver coins and items of jewellery uncovered for very long in the middle of a field. So it was a priority to move very quickly. And this was the excavation the following day. Took place. And here we see these are some of the gold bracelets. These are the bracelets here as they were found in situ in the soil. And they were able, the archaeological unit was able to remove the objects in groups. And this is a group of the silver ladles. We'll see what they look like cleaned a little bit further on, and you can see they were all very carefully stacked together. You can still see the soil, of course, the soil adhering to them as well. And that excavation, as I say, it was done very quickly. It was done in a day, but it was of crucial importance for our understanding of the find. Here is some of the. This shot shows some of the silver bowls from the hoard with a straw packing that still survived within them. And again, thanks to the very careful removal by the archaeologists, all this. This survived. I think Eric would probably not object if I'd say if he actually sort of continued to dig it all out. We probably wouldn't have had so much information about how it was buried. So that involvement was very important indeed. Here's a plan of where we're looking at. This is Home Farm in Hoxne, not more than half a mile from where we are. And that was where the hoard was buried, and that's the plan of the actual pit that the archaeologists dug to recover the hoard. It was buried in a wooden chest, rectangular wooden chest. This was the part that Eric had dug out. The archaeologists were able to excavate the rest of it. And that was done very quickly in the course of one day in November 1992. They came back again 2 years later to have a more leisurely look at the site, and in 1994, and these are views of the later excavation took place, and you can see the archaeologists are using metal detectors as well. They discovered, I think it was about another 300 coins from the hoard. Obviously, what had happened was the plough had actually clipped the top of the chest in which the hoard was buried, and coins had got scattered amongst the plough soil. But they discovered no other traces of Roman settlement there at all. And here are now none of the wooden chest itself in which the hoard was buried survived, but what we did find in large numbers were metal fittings from the chest. So these would have been metal strips around the edges of the chest, and this beautiful silver padlock as well. And this is a rough sketch plan of how the chest was filled with objects, looking at it in three layers. This is the lower level, this is the bottom of it, the middle level here, and the top level here. This is the hole that Eric Laws dug, but you can see that the objects were really quite carefully packed inside that chest. It was in shape. It was like a large suitcase. Yes, 2 feet by 1.5 feet, and about 1 foot deep. And we estimate that one strong person could carry it, probably be more comfortably carried by 2 people when full of objects. And in the display now in the British Museum, we've tried to give a sense of how of that chest. We've reconstructed it in perspex, so you can see inside it. Obviously, if we'd done it in wood, you wouldn't have this view. And you can see this is a selection of some of the objects as they were in the chest when it was buried in the ground in the 5th century AD. So, what can we say about the context for this hoard? This is a map of Roman East Anglia. Hoxne, as I said, there was no other record of Roman settlement in the parish before the hoard was discovered. But we are not much more than a mile away from the main Roman road leading from Colchester up to Caistor St Edmund, just south of Norwich. And we're about within 2 or 3 miles of the small Roman town at Skull here. So there's no Roman settlement known within the immediate vicinity, but it's not very far away. The other thing I'll just point out on this map are that we are in the middle of an area that is extraordinarily rich in very rich Roman hoards of this period, and I'm going to be coming back to show you views of the hoard from Thetford here, from Mildenhall, and Icklingham, and also from Morton Newton. And these are some of the major Roman treasure hoards of the late Roman Empire, but there are a lot more smaller ones. As I was coming over here from Cambridge this afternoon, I think within about 5 miles of here I drove past Burgate, that produced a hoard like a miniature version of Hoxne, which contained about 120 silver coins, 1 or 2 gold coins, and some silver spoons. And so we are in the middle of an area which is from which a large number of late Roman hoards are known. And there's an even more intriguing record that we have from 1780 of the discovery of a hoard of 650 gold coins of emperors from Valentinian to Honorius. That's pretty much the same period as the emperors represented in the Hoxne Hoard, found in Eye in 1780. Unfortunately, it is only the very briefest of records, and we don't know where any of those coins are today. But that is a very tantalizing reference, because that would have been the largest hoard of gold coins of the Roman period known from Roman Britain, and it is within 2 or 3 miles of Hoxne. And it would be lovely to know more about it, and particularly to know where exactly it was found, but unfortunately we just don't have that information. So, as I've described, the hoard was found by Eric and then excavated by the Suffolk County Council Archaeological Unit. And it was clear very early on that it was likely to be treasure trove. The laws changed since 1992, but under the law that we had at the time, objects had to be made of gold or silver and to have been deliberately buried with the intention of recovery to qualify as treasure trove, and then if they did, they became the property of the state. They were offered to museums to buy, and the finder and the landowner was eligible for a reward. And it was the duty of the British Museum to write a report on these finds for the coroner, who would hold an inquest to decide whether they met the criteria of being treasure trove. That was really the first duty that we had to do, that we had at the British Museum. Because the archaeologists had worked so quickly, they'd raised many of the objects in groups with soil still adhering to them, and these were taken apart very carefully in the laboratory, which is what we can see here. And then all the objects had to be cleaned. The coins needed to be cleaned so that we could identify what they were, while the other objects just received very basic cleaning for the report for the coroner. And in fact, actually, all that most of the objects required was careful brushing under distilled water. This was partly because they were all made of gold or silver of a very high standard of purity, and partly because the sandy soil conditions which preserved them very well. So this is, here we're looking at this is one of the large gold bracelets, and the soil's been very carefully brushed off it. You can see some of the smaller gold bracelets just here. We also, at the same time, produced a small booklet about the hoard, which I wrote with my colleague Catherine Johns, who's the expert on the jewellery and the plate in the hoard. And this was quite a much longer job, produced 2 volumes cataloguing all the objects in detail. This volume on describing all the coins came out in 2005, and then Catherine Johns' catalogue of all the jewellery and plate came out just 3 years ago in 2010. The Hoxne Hoard was duly declared to be treasure trove at an inquest held by the coroner in Lowestoft in September 1993. And so the next stage then was for it to be valued, and there's an independent committee, the Treasure Valuation Committee, which has the job of deciding what the full market value of the find was. They valued it at £1.75 million, and that reward was paid to Eric Laws, who was named as the sole finder, and he shared it with Mr. Watling, on whose land who was the tenant on whose land it was found. Once that valuation had been met, the British Museum then had the job of having to raise that money, and which we were able to do thanks to large grants from the Heritage Memorial Fund, the National Art Collections Fund, and the reward was paid to Eric Laws in April 1994. And then it became the British Museum's property and is now on display in the British Museum, and I'll show you some slides at the end of how it looks today. It's also been sent out on loan. It went to Ipswich Museum in 1994, and then it toured to Norwich, Manchester, Newcastle and Cardiff as part of a touring exhibition in 2003 to 4. So it's been seen widely across the country. So now I'll just turn to actually looking at what we have in the hoard. There were 200 items of gold and silver jewellery and tableware, including this group of 19 gold bracelets. And just to give you some context for this, before this hoard was discovered, I think we knew of hoards that contained 1 or 2 gold bracelets in them. This one has 19, which is just an unprecedented number. One of those is particularly interesting because it's got an inscription with someone's name on it. You can perhaps make it out running around the outside here. And it names Domina Lady Juliana. We also have, this is a view of 6 gold necklaces, 3 gold finger rings, and also this rather unusual object in the front, which is a body chain. There's a close-up view of it. It's got 2 settings with a gold coin in one setting and precious stones in the other setting. And this just shows you how such a chain would have been worn. This is a little terracotta figurine from Roman Egypt. But you can see the chain would have been worn across the body like that. And again, I mean, this was the first time such an object had ever been found in this country. Perhaps the iconic object from the hoard was this beautiful little silver tigress, which is not actually an object in its own right, in fact, because it's actually a handle from a much larger silver jug. You can see this is a jug from the Suffolk treasure, which has got 2 such handles on it. And then we also have this group of 4 pepper pots, including probably the best known one, which has a figure of a Roman empress. Probably we think this is Helena, who was the mother of Constantine the Great. And if any of you heard the radio series History of the World in 100 Objects, the Hoxne pepper pot featured in that. But it wasn't the only pepper pot, and just to explain how we know it's a pepper pot, the pepper would have sat in the base of the pot and been dispensed from the bottom of the pot. It wasn't the only one. There are 4 altogether in the hoard. Most of these actually were recovered in really fragmentary condition and had to be very carefully reconstructed. But we have one in the form of a goat over here, and one with the ancient Greek hero Heracles with Antaeus, wrestling with Antaeus on the back. The story there is that Antaeus used to challenge all passers-by to wrestling matches and kill them and collect their skulls, but he met his match in Heracles, who killed him by crushing him in a bear hug, and I think that's what's going on there. This is what these pepper pots look like when found, and you can see they're made of very thin plate silver, and they've had to be very carefully reconstructed. We also have a number of toilet implements, including toothpicks and ear cleaners with ibis heads. That's these ones here. The Romans were very particular about their cosmetic objects. And then there is a group of silver bowls. These are quite plain in design. This is actually from when they were on display in the British Museum. These weigh half a pound of silver each. Four on the four on the outside, and then a larger one in the middle weighing about a pound. The biggest the biggest component of the jewellery and the plate there consisted of silver spoons and ladles. And these are very fine gilded ladles with beautiful pattern, with beautiful designs on them. I'll just point out those two up there. This is a close-up view of them. They've got the head of the sea god Oceanus on them, and the quality of the workmanship is really superb. We also have 78 silver spoons in the hoard, which is doubles the number that had hitherto been found in Roman Britain. So it really was an extraordinarily large assemblage of them. And these two sets of 5 spoons are particularly interesting because they're inscribed with someone's name, a man's name, Aurelius Ursicinus. And this close-up view shows the inscription a little bit more clearly. It's on the bowl of these ones here, or Ursicini of, belonging to Aurelius Ursicinus, and then it's on the stem of that spoon there. In fact, there are 7 different names inscribed on various objects in the hoard. We already saw the gold bracelet with Juliana's name, but the name of Aurelius Ursicinus appears much more frequently than any others, and he's a very strong candidate for having been the owner of the hoard. Frustratingly, though, we can't identify him with a known historical personage. There's some other quite interesting names as well. There are these 2 very finely decorated silver vessels, and one of these 2 vessels has another name around the band. It's the band up here, the name of Eucherius, and this name is very close to a name that occurs on the back of a couple of silver dishes from the Roman Treasure, about 30 miles to the west of Hoxne, which is also in the British Museum. It's on the back of these 2 Bacchic dishes here. There is a name that is not quite the same, but it's very similar. It's Eutherius. And we do wonder whether they could be one and the same person, which would be very interesting if that were really the case. Eutherius owning these 2 dishes found in the Roman Treasure, and Eucherius owning that silver vessel from Hoxne. We'll probably never be sure whether they really are one and the same, but they're unusual names. And those silver jugs, which, I'll just go back to them here, are themselves quite similar to that jug there, which was found in this treasure of Christian silver from Water-Newton, which is a little bit further west still, just near Peterborough. So you can see the pattern that we've got of these hoards of late Roman precious metal objects from across this part of East Anglia. There's another parallel too with another one of these East Anglian treasures, the Thetford treasure, and you can see, this is a view of some of the objects from the Thetford treasure, and you can see gold bracelets, very similar to gold bracelets that we saw in Hoxne, and also gold necklaces too, which closely parallel those in Hoxne. There's one very interesting difference, though, with Thetford, because that contains objects with pagan references, especially to the cult of the god Faunus, and there are no Christian symbols at all on any of the objects, unlike Hoxne, which has a number of objects that have Christian symbols of them. So it looks as though the Hoxne Hoard must have belonged to a wealthy family of this period, and in fact it's very large, but the objects are typical of the sort of wealthy valuables that we'd expect a very well-to-do family might have had. And it's quite likely possible that their interests extended much beyond Britain. We know that wealthy families of this period, we're looking at the very end of the Roman period in Britain, could have owned land across many bits of the Roman Empire, not just in Britain. And then just before we leave our late Roman treasures, here's a view of the whole of the Meldon Hall treasure. This consisted just of these wonderful silver plates and bowls, and then again a few spoons down here. And the two plates with the name of Eutherius on them are those two there. So that was those are the main items of gold and silver jewellery and plate in the hoard. What about the coins? There are over 15,000 of them, 580 in gold and 14,500 in silver. What sort of wealth does this represent? Well, if we convert the silver coins to gold, we have 580 of the gold coins. We think the silver coins will be worth the equivalent of another 360 or so of them. So we get to just under about 950 gold coins altogether. And then we can add in, obviously, all the other the items of jewellery and plate in the hoard, which would give us probably another 350, the equivalent of another 350 gold coins. So we get to a total value of maybe for this hoard of maybe 1,350 gold coins, the type known as solidi. How big a sum was this? Well, we know that the most junior grade of civil servant, or the lowest ranks in the army, were paid 9 solidi a year. A doctor or a professor might receive 60 to 70 solidi, and the governor of a province could expect 400 solidi a year. So this is therefore the equivalent of 3.5 years' pay for one of the most senior officials in the whole of the Roman Empire, the governor of a province, which makes it look like a very substantial sum indeed. On the other hand, we also know about some Roman families in Rome who still had really enormous wealth. And we hear from some of the historians of the time that some of these wealthy senators in Rome might have had incomes of up to 300,000 gold coins a year. So it does put the 1,350 solidi in Hoxne in its context. It's a large sum of money, but there were people in the Roman Empire who owned much more money than in Hoxne treasure. So let's just turn to look at the coins now. Here they are again. They all post-date a reform of the coinage which was made in AD 367 when this emperor we see here, Valentinian I, reformed the fineness of the coin, brought it up to 99% pure again, and he denoted that by adding the letters OB on the back of the coins. OB standing for abriziacum, or refined gold. The other two letters that we're looking at down here, TR, the first two letters of the mint where this coin was made, the mint of Trier in current day Germany, which was the capital of the Western Roman Empire at the time. And the design shows Valentinian I and his co-emperor Valens on the back here. Here we see examples of the biggest, the most common group of gold coins in the hoard. These were made about 30 years later than Valentinian's time. They were made by two brothers, Honorius on the left and his older brother Arcadius, between around about 400 AD. And Honorius was the ruler of the western part of the empire, Arcadius of the eastern part of the empire. They had the same design on the back, the emperor standing with his foot on a captive and holding a small figure of victory in his hands. And the mint here is M and D, which stands for Mediolanum or Milan, which was the they had to abandon Trier in Germany by then because it was too dangerous, it was too near the frontier, and it was getting attacked by Franks and Germans too frequently. So they've now established their capital at Milan, Mediolanum in northern Italy. And there's no fewer than 360 coins of this type in the hoard. There are a few other, they didn't just strike coins in Milan, they also made them in Rome, RM, and also Ravenna, RV. And Ravenna was chosen as the capital in the 5th century. It was in a safer place than Rome, when you may remember it being sacked by the Goths in 410 AD. Ravenna was protected by swamps surrounding it, and it was thought to be a safer place for the imperial capital in the early years of the 5th century. We also have 60 of the larger silver coins in the hoard. These are called Miniorenses. This is the oldest one, and you can see it's actually quite worn. It's made by Constantine II. And here are two later ones of Theodosius on the left and Arcadius on the right. There are 60 of these large silver coins, and no fewer than 5 of them are of completely unpublished types. But by far the majority of the coins in the hoard are these coins, silver coins known as siliquae. And here are 2 of the Emperor Constantius II from the 350s AD. The one on the larger one on the left is one made before the weight reduction, which we carried out in 358. Here is a later one, obviously much smaller in weight, and I come back to this. I pointed out now this one's actually also been clipped around the edge, and this is quite a characteristic of the coins in the hoard. We have a very small number of half siliquae, very small silver coins. There's 5 of them altogether, and these are coins of Arcadius and Honorius. But as I say, 14,500 of the coins are all of the same denomination, the siliqua denomination. These again are of Constantius II. Here are coins of his successor, Julian, and this is one of him as a young man. Here he is with a long flowing beard. Julian actually was something of a rebel. The emperors since Constantine the Great had all been Christian, but Julian was a firm pagan, and he declared his paganism by growing this long flowing beard. And down here, this is another coin of Julian, but this is just to show you how heavily clipped a lot of the coins can be. In fact, 85% of the silver coins in the hoard have been clipped to a greater or lesser extent. This is a big issue of the silver coins were made in the names of 3 emperors, the 2 brothers, Valentinian I and Valens, and Valentinian's son Gratian between 375 and 379. And these are made at Trier. They were still, this is before they'd abandoned Trier, and we've got the letters TR down here. And the other two letters, PS, stand for refined silver, just like OB stands for refined gold on the gold coins. The biggest group of silver coins, though, come from a bit later, from around about 400 AD. And again, as we were looking at with the gold coins, they now moved the main mint to Milan in northern Italy, MD there. And there are over, and these are coins of Honorius on the right here, and his brother Arcadius here. And there's over 4,000 coins in the hoard with that type. So this is the sort of, this group counts for the sort of largest single item element in the hoard. We've also got, very interestingly, some 450 coins which are not genuine at all, but which were forgeries made at the time. These were hardly known, were not very well known at all before this hoard turned up. A very big group that we were able to study, a group of these forgeries. And we've also been able to actually analyse the metal from which these were made. You would think, since they were forgeries, that they would be made of a much baser metal than the regular coins. I should say the regular coins are made of very high quality silver, 92–93% pure. Curiously, these copies are actually made of, the silver content is very much the same. These two have got the same, made from the same die on the side, the obverse side with the head, although they've got completely different designs on the back. And very interestingly, because we have examples of forgeries from other hoards found around Britain, this one actually, the one on the left, was actually not found in Hoxne Hoard at all, but it was found at a hoard from a place called Whitwell in Rutland. So you can build out patterns of these forgeries and work out where they were circulating. They were clearly being made in Britain at this time, unlike the official coins, which of course were being made, which were made overseas. And then we have just the two latest coins in the hoard are these two issues made by a usurper called Constantine III, who was governor of Gaul, and that's France, and declared himself emperor in 407 AD. And these were made at his mint in Lyon in southern France. So, and date to the first year of his reign in 407 to 408. So these are the two coins that enable us to say that the hoard must have been placed in the ground sometime after 407 AD, which is also the period when the Romans effectively abandoned control of Britain. But I'll come back to talk about the burial date of the hoard in just a minute. It's not quite as simple as it might seem. We know very little about what exactly was happening in Britain during this period, the first few decades of the 5th century AD. And the general picture that we have is one of the collapse of the central authority in the province and its replacement by a series of local fiefdoms. So there was no more central control, and instead we have it looks as though there's a situation where people, a number of local strongmen were ruling in their own local areas, while the large part of eastern Britain, including where we are now, in Hoxne, was being settled by Saxons from across the North Sea. And under these circumstances, it's not surprising that many of the inhabitants should have chosen to bury their wealth, and equally that some of them should never have been able to recover it. And that's one thing that it's very easy to forget when we're studying these hoards. The ones that we know of today is only probably a very small part of the total number that were originally buried at the time. We only know of the unsuccessful ones, the ones whose owners were never able to come back and recover them again. And one of the few accounts that we have of the burial of a hoard, and as you can imagine, we don't have any accounts from the Roman period of people burying hoards, comes from the diary of this man, Samuel Pepys. in the 17th century. In June 1667, Pepys wrote in his diary, and he was living in London at the time, he wrote in his diary that there was a general panic because the Dutch fleet had sailed up the Medway and destroyed some of the forts there and was threatening to sail up the Thames to London. And he decided to conceal what wealth he could lay his hands on in his family estate at Brampton in Northamptonshire. And he sent his father and his wife to Brampton by coach with a bag containing some £1,300 in coins. And he sent on another 1,000 gold pieces by special messenger, and then he came himself with another £300 worth. There these objects, there all his wealth was, buried in the grounds of his father's house in Brampton in Northamptonshire. 6 months later, the panic had died down, and he decided it was safe to try and dig it up again, but it wasn't quite as easy as he thought it was going to be. What he didn't have was what Eric Laws had, which was a metal detector. His wife he says in his diary, his wife gave me so bad an account of her and my father's method of burying our gold that it made me mad, and she herself is not pleased with it, she believing that my sister knows of it. My father and she buried it on a Sunday when they were gone to church, in open daylight in the midst of the garden, where for aught they knew many eyes might see them, which put me into trouble. And I presently cast about how to have it back again and secure it here, the times being a little better now. So he went out at night with a lantern to try and get it back. But they could not justly tell me where it was, and I began to fear that it had all been, I began to fear the worst, but by poking with a spit, I at length located it not half a foot under the ground. He's dug away frantically, but succeeded merely in scattering the coins in the grass and the loose earth. Finally, coins, dirt and all, were raised and washed, and to his great annoyance he found himself about 100 pieces short. Fearing the neighbours might have observed him and come searching on their own account, he and his servant sieved through the earth until they'd recovered another 79 coins. So he was still over 20 coins short, and if someone were to go back to that place with a metal detector today, I often wonder if they would find those 21 coins. But the account makes several very interesting points. It shows that Pepys buried his wealth because of the imminent fear of foreign invasion, and that he chose to bury it in as safe and secluded a place as he could find at his country estate and not at his London home. And it finally shows that he had great difficulty in recovering it, and indeed he did not succeed in getting all the coins back. No doubt these factors would have been the same in Roman times. If we were to find today the 20-odd coins that he never succeeded in digging up, we'd have no idea that they might merely represent a tiny part of what was originally a much larger hoard, if it weren't for the account in his diary. Of course, that particular consideration doesn't apply to the Hoxne treasure, since thanks to the fact that it was carefully excavated, we do know that it was contained within a wooden chest, and can be reasonably confident that we have received pretty well all of it, apart from a few of those very small silver coins which seem to be scattered by ploughing. In fact, we know some 200 hoards of gold and silver coins of this period from Britain. And several of these contained other precious metal objects as well, like the Hoxne treasure. And in addition, we have hoards of gold and silver objects like the Milden Hall treasure and the Thetford treasure, which are not known to have contained any coins. This map shows the distribution of all coin hoards buried later than 394 AD, from the very latest period of Roman Britain. And although hoards are found across England, you'll notice there are none at all from Wales. There's only one from Cornwall in the southwest, and hardly any in the northeast as well. the great majority, there's a few in Yorkshire, but the great majority come from the south and east of a line from the Humber down to the Severn estuary. And it's another very curious feature of coin circulation at this time, that with a very few exceptions, hoards of silver coins are only found in two areas, Britain, which we've seen, from which we know of some 200, and one other part of the Roman Empire, which is Romania, from which we've got a little group of about 20 coins. Otherwise, the hoards of silver coins are extraordinarily rare across the rest of the Roman Empire. Hoards of gold coins turn up regularly enough, but not silver. It seems to have been a particular speciality of Britain. This is just comparing that map of the hoards that sit on the left with another map that we can produce now. We couldn't have done this 20 years ago because the information just wasn't available. But this is a map showing single finds of silver coins and silver and bronze coins of the same period as the hoards. And you can see that the distribution is really quite similar to the distribution of the hoards. This map, I might mention, is possible thanks to the fact that since 1997 we've had a network of staff through the Portable Antiquities Scheme around the country whose role is to record all the archaeological finds found by metal detectors and in fact by any members of the public, which since over the last 16 years has now built up a database, an online database, which has some 900,000 objects on it. And I hope that you'll see that one of the most densely distributed areas is where we are now. Norfolk and Suffolk and Norfolk between them are one of the richest areas for not just the hoards. I mean, you can see there's a good number of hoards shown on this map, but also for single finds as well. But of course, so this puts Hoxne in its context. You can see, hoards of this period are not rare, but of course what makes Hoxne unique is its sheer size, with it more than 15,000 gold coins. The previous largest hoard of coins of this period has 3,000 coins. And just a year ago, we found the previous a hoard from near St Albans in Hertfordshire, which had 150 gold solidi, and that was quite a major event. That was the largest hoard of those coins since Hoxne, but as I say, it was less than a quarter of the size, a quarter of the number in Hoxne. So just to conclude, today the Hoxne Hoard, as I said earlier, was acquired by the British Museum, and you can see it in the Roman Britain Gallery in the museum. This is a view of the gallery, and it proudly occupies one of the most prominent cases in that gallery. This is a view of it. I'm afraid I can't say that we have all 15,000 coins out, but we do have all the important items of gold and silver jewellery on show. That's the body chain. You might remember here are the spoons, and that was the Perspex chest, reconstructed chest that I showed earlier. And you can also see some of the other finest treasures from East Anglia in this gallery as well. Yes, here's the Perspex chest again. And if you turn around on the other side, you will see the whole of the Melbourne Hall as well. So I hope that's given you an interesting introduction to Hoxne. It's been a great pleasure for me to come back again nearly 21 years later and remind myself of where it came from. And we actually, I can say, we have just initiated a major research project which will be trying to look at all these hoards that we know of from Britain, over 2,800 altogether, and particularly to look at not so much cataloguing all the individual objects in them, but to look at where they were found, where they were buried in the landscape, and can we draw any conclusions about particular areas of landscape. And it's very interesting on my way here to remind myself actually where this hoard was buried. It's not in a notable part of the landscape at all. It's in the middle of a field that is almost dead flat. There's lots of very we've spent a lot of time studying the contents of all these hoards. It's very difficult, it's quite easy to forget that they're actually also part of the landscape. And it seems pretty clear that a hoard like the Hoxne Hoard was probably put in the ground by its owners because they were afraid of Saxon invasions. It comes from the period, the breakup of Roman rule in Britain. That seems the most likely theory for it. But it's probably not the right explanation for all the other, necessarily for all the other 2,800 hoards known from across Roman Britain. And what we want to do is to look at them much more systematically in their landscape, map them using GIS systems, and see if we can draw more conclusions about where they were. And there's so many more questions still to be uncovered, and just in this case, where there must have been a major Roman building somewhere in this vicinity where the owners of the Hoxne Hoard lived. Where is it? We don't know. We have a wonderful amount of information, and thanks to discoveries like this treasure about Roman Britain, but there's just so much more still to discover. So thank you very much.